Hi, my name is Sarah Powers, and welcome to my podcast, or as I like to call it, my bedcast. The concept I will be exploring today is the theme of fall from power seen throughout all of the books we've read this year. The three books I'll be talking about are Genesis by Robert Alter, Paradise Lost by John Milton, and Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. In the book of Genesis, the fall from power we see is when Adam and Eve are kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Next, in Paradise Lost, Satan falls from heaven all the way down to hell. Finally, in Frankenstein, his fall was into madness. In the book of Genesis, the part I'm mainly going to be focusing on is when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. While they were here, God gave them one rule which can be found on page 8. But from the tree of knowledge, good and evil, you shall not eat. Little did Adam and Eve know, eating from this tree meant they would fall from innocence and they would soon be graced with the gift of knowledge. God was definitely not happy when he heard about what happened. After he heard that Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, to Eve he said, I will terribly sharpen your birth pangs. In pain you shall bear children, and for your man shall you be longing, and he shall rule over you. And this can be found on page 13. In Paradise Lost, Satan was originally among the angels in heaven with God. Satan eventually got very jealous of the power God held and decided he wanted to be more powerful than God. On page 4, starting at line 34, it says, He it was whose gale, stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind. What time his pride had cast him out of heaven with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers. I took this as God's anger toward Satan by convincing Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge with the hopes of becoming more powerful than him. And then on page 5, starting at line 70, it says, Such place eternal justice had prepared for those rebellious, here their prison ordained in utter darkness, and their portion set as far removed from God and light of heaven. As for the center thrice to the utmost pole, oh how unlike the place from whence they fell. This is now talking about how since Satan was rebelling, he was removed as far from God and the light of heaven as the quote said, and then focusing on the word fall, it is talking about his fall to hell. Finally, in Frankenstein, what I'm going to be focusing on is Frankenstein's fall into madness after he creates his monster. In the beginning of chapter 4, it talks about the first moments life is breathed into Frankenstein's monster. It begins on page 84 when it says, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. This greatly disturbed him, and next he decided to go up to his bed and try and go to sleep, to where he was awoken by the image of his mother, and as it appears on page 85, it states, I thought I saw Elizabeth in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and I thought I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arm. Once Frankenstein realized he was able to bring forth life, it greatly disturbed him as he had the power then to bring back his mother that had passed away. Following this, he went into absolute madness, and everybody around him seemed to notice. Furthermore, Frankenstein was very worried because he had brought a monster capable of mass destruction onto this world, and he had no idea of the powers he could hold. His cousin even took note of this, and on page 127 he said, My dearest cousin, but I am not so wretched as you are. There is an expression of despair and sometimes revenge in your countenance that makes me tremble. Be calm, my dear Victor. Another example of falling from power in Frankenstein would be Frankenstein's monster after he is created and all the trouble he has to go through throughout the rest of his life. After that first moment when Frankenstein's monster reached out his hand is when everything falls for him. Frankenstein recoiled in disgust and immediately fled. This troubled him so much to where the next morning he ran away. And again, on page 148, it says, What chiefly struck me was the gentle manners of these people, and I longed to join them, but dared not. Frankenstein was talking about the family that he watched while he spent some time in the woods. When he saw this family didn't have enough firewood, he got them more firewood. He had done countless more acts of kindness for this family until one day, the blind father was home alone and Frankenstein decided to go in and say hi. After he had been watching them, realized what he had been missing out on and took note of their loving and kindness and bonds that they made, and he learned about the concept of a family, which is something he never got. But after talking to the blind father for a little while, the rest of his family came home, and Felix, the son, page 175, he dashed me to the ground and struck me violently with a stick. In this instance, Frankenstein had done nothing wrong, but solely based on his looks, was attacked. Once again on page 181. I was scarcely hid when a young girl came running towards the spot where I was concealed, when suddenly her foot slipped and she fell into the rapid stream. I rushed from my hiding place and with extreme labor from the force of the current saved her and dragged her to shore. On seeing me, he darted toward me and tearing the girl from my arms, hastened towards the deeper parts of the woods. But when the man saw me draw near, he aimed a gun, which he carried at my body and fired. Moving, or I guess running to my next point. One thing we see consistent throughout these books, more specifically Paradise Lost and Genesis, is the jealousy of Adam and Eve. On page 169 in Frankenstein, it says, "But Paradise Lost excited different and far deeper emotions. I often referred to several situations as their similarities struck me like my own. Like Adam, I was created apparently united by no link to any other being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in every other respect. Many times I considered Satan the fitter emblem of my condition." This allusion to Adam and Satan shows the effect their story and their fall had on Frankenstein. But at the beginning of my quote, Paradise Lost was directly stated in the book, showing the effect Milton's work had on future literature. There's a transformation from Genesis to Paradise Lost, where in Paradise Lost we are introduced to Satan as more of an anti-hero, and he is portrayed in such a way where we can sympathize with him. And it's the same from Paradise Lost to Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster is also portrayed in a way where we sympathize with him. By Shelley alluding Frankenstein to Satan, though, and connecting their despair after their fall, it allows us to understand both of the texts deeper. To wrap things up, through looking at all of these texts side by side and noticing the way Adam and Eve, Satan, and Frankenstein are portrayed, we can use each text to better stand another, the decisions the writer made, the connections stated between the texts, as well as the choices made by the characters in the book.